Okay, I hope you're all doing well. Can everyone hear me and see me?
Yes.
Great, excellent. Thanks, guys. Okay, I'm sure you guys want to get some more information about the exam. So let's get going and I'll show you what I have and we can talk about it all a little bit, okay? So let's see. There we go. I think you should be able to see my screen now. Okay, great. So our regular housekeeping. Today we're working on chapter 27. You had your Achieve homework that was due last night. Next Tuesday, which is, by the way, next week is my final week with you guys. So if you're sick of me, there's good news. Now, we are going to be working on chapter 36. Now, please pay attention that chapter 36 is not in order. We've been going almost in chapter order for a while now. Chapter 36 is out of order. Please be aware of that. Don't work on the wrong chapter. Don't read the wrong chapter at the wrong time. Okay. And of course, you'll have your pre-lecture assignment on Achieve due on the night before. Okay, so midterm exam one. It'd be nice if I learned how to spell. Midterm exam one. So by now, I think all of you have figured out that your grades are available to you in Achieve. Okay, and before we talk about the grades and everything else, I'd like to take a couple of quick polls in iClicker. So if you'll just log into iClicker, and the first question I'd like to ask is basically, did you prefer taking the exam in Achieve, or would you rather take exams in Blackboard? So if you could give me some feedback there, I'd really appreciate it. I thought this would probably be the most efficient way to ask these questions. All right, so if you will all pick one of those choices. Obviously, there's no right answer here, so it's not, again, you just have to log in to iClicker and you're just answering in iClicker. The question is on the screen, so you don't have to worry about that, okay? And all right, so let's see, we've got, okay, we're getting close here. So really, so it seems like Blackboard is preferred. Okay, so that's good to know. Thank you for your answers. Okay. All right, I think we can probably stop this now. Okay, all right. So it seems that 58% of you seem to prefer Blackboard over the 41% who liked Achieve, and 1% went with option C. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so let's see if I can. I always lose the share. Always lose the chair. So it's going to do that. I think I have 3 questions for you guys in total. Okay. Okay. Sorry, guys. Give me just a sec, and we'll try and go on to the next question. All right. So Blackboard better than Achieve. Okay, we got that one. Here's the next one. Basically, I'd like to get a sense for how much time you spent preparing for the exam. So if you could give me just a rough breakdown, it doesn't, obviously, doesn't have to be exact here. Just how much time did you spend specifically studying for this exam? Not, you know, like beyond what you normally do in preparation for the course, right? So what was extra basically about the exam? Okay, the question is on your screen, here in the lecture, and you're just answering in iClicker. Okay, so okay, looks like a whole bunch of answers are coming in. Okay. Let's see what those results look like. Okay, wow. So a really nice distribution of time spent, right? So a nice normal distribution. So with the peak being 35% saying C, 6 to 12 hours, and then about 23, 24% each going with B or D, and 16% say more than 24 hours, and 2% say 2 hours or less. Okay. I would say that's probably close to what I expected, although maybe I expected less, being more than 24 hours. Okay, someone's got their hand up. You have to tell me if I mispronounce your name. Favor?
It's favor.
Favor. Okay, sorry.
My iClicker keeps saying hidden by instructor. It's not showing.
Okay, I'm sorry. That was very. Favor, you're very choppy there. Could you try saying that again?
I'm sorry. My iClicker keeps saying hidden by instructor. I can't see the question.
Yeah, the question is on the screen, and I'm sharing the question right on the screen, so you don't have to worry about seeing it in iClicker. It's right there on the screen. Yeah, all you're doing is using iClicker to enter your choice. It's the same way we always do iClicker, okay?
Thank you.
You got it. Okay, now let's see. Hey, I didn't lose the share that time. Okay, great. Next, poll question. Okay, I'm restarting. Here we go. What was the most useful source for you in prepping for the exam? And I just have some choices here. The last one is basically other sources that you may have found on your own, but basically I want to know what do you feel was most helpful? Rebecca has a question. Go ahead, Rebecca.
I feel like even though I studied from the slides, I should have studied more from the textbook itself, and I would have done better.
Okay.
Professor,
all of these...
the options aren't coming up. I mean, we're not able to choose A, B, C, D, or E.
On the poll?
Yeah, on the.
Yeah, it's not showing up.
Really?
Same for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you started the poll. Oh,
Same
now
here.
it came up.
I see it. I see it. It's there.
Okay. I restarted it, so, but I had 0 responses.
Sometimes when it doesn't pop up right away, you just have to refresh it, and then it should be good.
Yeah, you know, the problems, again, we're always at the mercy of the technology. But okay, now I'm starting to get responses coming in. So I'm sorry, what's that? I think someone might have their mic on. Rebecca, did you still have a question, or you just need to lower your hand? Looks like Mark has a question. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to give my feedback that I thought that I felt like I knew the concepts, but it was really the timing that really threw me off, especially if there were lots of diagrams or lots of reading for the questions. So, you know, when I look back through my answers, I felt like I knew this stuff, but I was just really, really pressed for time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. I mean, I think it's fair to say that you were pressed for time. It was 50 questions in 75 minutes, but you knew that going in, you know, that this wasn't going to be a kind of exam where you had a lot of time to think about the nuances of questions, right? You needed to get in there and get going. So Adam said timing's brutal. Well, you know, okay, understood. I understand those sentiments. Okay.
I wish we could choose more than one for this question on the iClicker poll.
Well, it doesn't seem to be popping up for me. There, no, that was, yes. There it is. Okay, good. Okay, so seems like textbook was the winner here with about 50%, followed by slides at about 32%. Okay, helpful. Thank you. Thank you all for that. Okay, all right, let's see if we can get going here. Lost it. So weird how sometimes you lose the misleading syllabus. Syed, you're going to have to explain that one. Syed?
Yeah, Professor, I think what Syed is trying to say is in the syllabus, it does say that exams will be based primarily on lecture. But after taking the exam, I personally, in my opinion, I felt like it was based off more of the textbook. But that could have been my question. So,
All
but
right, great. I'd like to hear that from Syed, though. He was the one who made the statement.
I mean, I felt the same way, so I was just putting in my input. I just didn't write it in
Okay,
the chat.
great. But Syed, is that what you were saying? Syed has suddenly gone silent. Okay, Francis, you have your hand up.
He put yes, sir, Syed.
I'm sorry?
That Syed put yes, sir.
In
I
the
guess.
chat.
Yeah.
He said that his mic doesn't work.
Okay. All right, no problem. Okay, so here's the stats for the exam. Okay. Oh, Dana has a hand up too. Go ahead, Dana, before we talk about the stats.
Really quickly, I just wanted to mention that I feel like the Achieve test wasn't very fair because we were promised all multiple choice, and a few of us ended up with some short answer questions that
There were
were
no
not
short answer
really taught.
questions. No. Dana, I'm going to stop you there because there were no short answer questions, right? There were a couple where they were fill in the blank where you had to still input the letter. That's multiple choice. That's not short answer.
No, it asked me for a calculation and then I had to put like a number in.
Okay,
Yeah, there
so
were short
punch in-
answers, not calculations as
I
well.
had the same.
Yeah, there was a
Not
calculation.
the same.
Yeah.
Calculations.
Okay, and you feel that this invalidates the exam?
No, I'm just saying that question particularly could be thrown out. If
Oh, I'm not throwing.
possible.
No questions are being thrown out. Okay, all the questions were fair and well within the guidelines for what I told you the exam was covering. Some people seem to feel that the textbook was a better source in terms of the exam material. You had questions from every single key concept that we have talked about. I've stressed the key concepts and the importance of sort of grappling with them from day one. So this was not by any means an unfair exam, and there was nothing thrown at you which you should not have prepped for. Okay, so now let's talk about. Oh, Kayla, go ahead, Kayla.
Also,
Guys, this is not, wait, Kayla, before you start, okay? This is not an airing of the grievances, okay? This is not Festivus, all right? So, if you have individual gripes, I understand that, you may have individual gripes, but the exam was fair. The description of what it was going to be was accurate, and that's where we are. So go ahead, Kayla.
that also, some people got math problems and others didn't. So
Yes, and
that the people that got math problems got a lower grade.
and you know that how?
Like talking amongst us.
Okay, so math is unfair in the science course?
No, it's just that
Well,
the
no,
math
but
questions
since
took
we're,
longer.
yeah,
The
exactly.
question, no, the questions were not harder. It was just a different question.
Well, yeah, but we weren't tested on the same material.
Yes, you were.
But if someone else didn't have math, that's not the same material.
it's all the same material. It covers the same key concepts. It covers the same material from the textbook and the slides. Sorry if you don't think so, but this is the course. And math is a fundamental part of all natural sciences.
Well,
There was
yeah,
no math. Go ahead.
but that some people got luckier than others with the questions they were given. Like the level of difficulty, I mean.
No, the level of difficulty for each bank of questions, really, I put a lot of effort into making sure that they were the same. Whether the person who got a math question is more or less comfortable with math has to do with the student, not the exam. And I think that many of your gripes have to do with that. So let's hold off here. Let's look at the stats, and then let's get going on the lecture, okay? Now, here is the descriptive statistics and the distribution. The distribution, if you look at it here, this is a histogram. This really is pretty good. I mean, it's pretty close to normal, right? Our average was 67.285. That differs from the average that you see by, I think, a point. In Achieve, that's because Achieve is actually taking into account students who have not taken the exam yet due to extenuating circumstances. That was all prearranged, so there's nothing out of whack there. Okay. Average was there. You have your standard error, your median, and your mode, and your standard deviation. Someone has their mic on, please turn it off. You could see the range of scores. The minimum score was 28%, and one person ended up with a perfect score of 100. But you'll notice as well that there were many people, by the way, just to help you kind of get oriented with this, I broke the histogram up into 5-point regions. So for instance, if you look at the bar that contains the mean, that would be the bar with the highest peak at 70. So that 70 means 65 to 70. 75 means 71 to 75. 80 means 76 to 80. So that's how you read the histogram. Okay, and so yeah, so this is the grades for your first midterm. I'm happy with the distribution. There's a bit of a tail on the low end. Obviously, I'm not thrilled about that. I would have liked for those students to have been able to perform better on the exam. But yeah, that's where we are. Alexandra, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to say that some people were saying the exam was unfair, and I just wanted to bring up that in the I think what people were trying to talk about was the fact that some people had all really long paragraph questions, and other people had really short multiple choice questions, so it was
Okay.
kind of hard with timing.
No, all the questions were easily doable within 75 minutes. I screened every one of the questions. No one had a paragraph. Okay, so I've heard your gripes. I've asked for some feedback. We will make adjustments, I'm sure, going forward with the other exams, but we are going to move on to the lecture now. Okay, Adam, did you have a question about lecture, or is this a gripe about the exam?
It's also about the exam. If you want, I could just wait till after class.
I think it's probably best. Okay,
Yeah,
so, okay. All right. If anybody wants to stay after to complain about the exam, you can. I will listen. But this idea that it was in any way unfair, or that you didn't know what to expect, or anything along those lines, understand that at this point, unless you can really support your argument, I don't know that those are valid complaints. Okay. Lara?
It's not a complaint, it's just a question about
Yeah.
so the grade that we got on our Achieve, that's the grade that's our Blackboard grade book.
That's your percentage grade on the exam, yeah.
Okay, and yeah, I was just making sure you're not like changing it anyway or doing something different.
Nope. No, not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you got it. Okay, Francis, you have another question?
Yeah, it's about the timing of the test. So the 50, you said it was going to be between like 40, 60, and you said 50. I think if you were to make it above 50, we wouldn't have any time. So between like 40 questions and 50 is like really good for the 75 minutes.
Thank you. Okay. This is the last question, presuming it's about the exam, given that we haven't started the lecture yet. Sadia.
Yeah, just the same question that's being asked in the chat. Would there be any curve for this test or no?
No. No, there's no curve on the exam. I told you before the exam that there would be no curving on exams or assignments, that any curving that needs to happen at the end for the course as a whole.
Oh, and just one more thing about what Francis said earlier. So for me, I just feel like if I had an additional 10 minutes, I think it would have helped me. It was very time consuming for me at
I
least. I don't
understand.
know for everyone else.
I understand. I understand. 50 questions, 75 minutes. There's no surprises there, though, guys. You did not have time to sit there and really get into the philosophy of the question. Okay? So, all right, we are moving on. Okay, evolution of seed plants. I want to mention, and I will bring up this particular palm that you see here. This palm is actually very unique, and it has its own name. This individual tree has its own name. It's named Methuselah, and we will talk a little bit about that palm later on. Okay. Here are your key concepts for this chapter. There are 4 of them, so all the things that we will be discussing again fall under one of these 4 key concepts. Okay, so we're gonna kind of go back a little bit and talk about the seedless plants that we learned about in last lecture. Let's go back to the Devonian, where we had the progymnosperms, which were these seedless vascular plants, these first vascular plants. They are pretty much extinct now. But one of their distinguishing features is that they had these woody stems, these harder, stiffer stems that allowed them to really be more upright. Okay, and that created the ability to kind of reach for the sun in essence and find more light. Okay, so 2 other innovations were pollen and seeds. Pollen and seeds were key innovations because they allowed plants to invade deeper and deeper into land, which meant drier and drier habitats. Okay, remember, the further away you get from a water source, the more specialized equipment you need to have. So you say, well, why? Well, we have pollen and we have seeds, the two adaptations that we are discussing here. Remember, before pollen, there was sperm. Okay, and what's really super interesting is that sperm transfer by pollen doesn't require water, right? So by evolving pollen instead of sperm, you can go further into land. So now let's think about seeds. Okay, so the question I'm asking here is, why would the evolution of seeds contribute to the success of plants in colonizing drier and drier land? Now, let's see what's going on here. Okay, the poll is open. Okay, so you've got your choices. Again, the question is on the screen. Guys, we should know how to use iClicker at this point in the course. The question is always on your screen, in the slides, and then all you're doing is answering in iClicker. Another 10 seconds or so.
Professor, my iClicker is not letting me answer. It just keeps saying no response.
Okay. All right. Well, we're pretty close to getting all the responses, so let's stop it and let's see what we've got here. Okay. So the correct answer here is E. Okay. B and C are correct. All right. And actually, only 3% of you picked E. Half of you picked C, which is one of the correct answers, and about 13% of you picked B. So basically, what are we saying here? What we're saying, and I'm having, iClicker it seems to be having trouble today. It seems to be giving trouble on all ends. So this does not look like it is a problem. Okay, yeah, that's okay. Why won't you just click back up? All right, okay. So iClicker seems to be on the fritz today. But anyway, so the question that we're asking here is, what is it about seeds that makes success on drier and drier land possible? And it's the fact that seeds can spread to new locations on land, right? So that's going to be a key phenotype of this adaptation, okay? And that seeds protect the embryo, right? Think about it. The embryo of the plant is encased in this protective pod that we call a seed, right? It's protected from drying out, it's protected from physical damage, it's protected from, all kinds of environmental concerns. So that's why it's B and C. No, I've closed the poll. Don't worry about it. It seems iClicker is just on the fritz today, and we'll have to just again, we have to deal with things as they come. Okay. All right. Now let's get going. Okay. So just as I said, seeds protect the dormant embryo. They germinate when conditions are right. So the seed has to have a way to detect when conditions are right. Okay. The first seeds were from these sort of woody ferns, okay, called seed ferns. They're now extinct, but we do have fossils of them. Okay. And all living seed plants, all extant existing seed plants, fall into two groups: the gymnosperms, which we mentioned last time, and we're going to kind of go through them again a little bit, okay, and the angiosperms. Angiosperms are flowering plants that produce flowers. And when you think about plants, the vast majority of the plants that you are probably familiar with, land plants that you're familiar with, are angiosperms, okay? That's how important flowering is to plant fitness, right? It has had a major impact on the ability of plants to diversify. Okay, so But first, we're going to talk about gymnosperms. Gymnosperms like conifers and cichlids. Yes, Rebecca, you have a question.
Are angiosperms also plants that produce fruit?
Yeah, so most fruits are going to be angiosperms. Yes, exactly. Okay, so so here's sort of a breakdown on the bottom. You can see these eras that we've been talking about as the Earth has evolved, right? So we have the Devonian, and that's where we talked about the gymnosperms sort of coming up in the Devonian period, right? And you can see here are the gymnosperms right here. These are those groups. Okay, up to today. And you can see the angiosperms, those flowering plants, didn't evolve until much later. Basically, we're talking about the end of the Jurassic period. Okay, and but yet there's an awful lot of plants in this group. And so you see how successful angiosperms have been. It helps put it into perspective, okay? So some generalities about seed plants. Remember the sporophyte and the gametophyte, right? So in seed plants, the gametophyte generation is really reduced, even more than it is in in ferns, right? And that is because remember what happens with the sporophytes and the gametophytes, right? When we talked about using sperm as opposed to pollen, the gametophyte is haploid. It develops while attached to the sporophyte, and it is nutritionally dependent upon the sporophyte. And here we kind of look at some of these examples. The early plant with the large gametophyte and the large sporophyte, right? And then those early ferns where the sporophyte was large and the gametophyte was really reduced. And then seed plants, right? We're kind of taking that even further, where you have the sporophyte here depicted in blue, and the gametophyte is really reduced and separated, right? We're separating out the male versus the female, or to be more precise, the micro gametophytes, okay, versus the mega gametophytes. Okay, so let's talk about that male and that female end. Okay, pollen. Seed plants are heterosporous, right? You have the male and you have female. Okay, the microspores, the male side, okay, they divide mitotically, and they produce pollen grains. Here you can see pollen grains sort of falling out of the microspores of this particular plant. Okay, pollen grains, the walls. Pollen is really an amazing biological sort of adaptation, right? Pollen's really tough. It has in its walls this sporopollenin, and it's one of the most biologically resistant products that we know of. It helps protect pollen from drying out. It helps protect pollen from physical and chemical damage. It's really very good at doing what it needs to do: protect the genetic material, to go ahead and help get the pollen to the megaspores. Okay, the megaspores, the female side, those are not shed. Pollen is shed, right? The megaspores are not. They develop into the female gametophytes, okay, within the megasporangia. They go through a haploid division, but it's mitosis, right? It's not meiosis that they're going through. What's happened in seed plants is that, I'm sorry, you guys can't hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes, we can.
And so what happened in the megasporangium, the female reproductive parts, basically, of these seed plants is that it's becoming closed, right? You get the ovule that is now enclosed and it stays in place, right? And that has had major effect on pollination. So in order to get pollination, you have to have pollen come in contact with this megasporangium, right? Okay, so you get a pollen grain, it lands usually somewhere very near the male gametophyte. And then the pollen grain sprouts a pollen tube, okay? It elongates, it really basically digests its way to the megagametophyte, okay? And once that happens, once this tube is complete, then sperm is released from the tube and it fertilizes the egg, in essence, to form a zygote. So here we have a zoomed in photo. I thought it would be helpful to see. These are individual pollen grains, and you can see that they all have tubes growing. Okay. So how does a seed develop? You get a diploid zygote, and that diploid zygote then grows. It goes through mitotic divisions. But at some point, growth gets suspended. It stops, and the embryo, instead of developing into a plant, stays dormant inside this, for lack of a better way of saying it, this enclosed husk. Okay, that is the seed. It's multicellular. It's not unicellular. It's always going to be multicellular, and it's going to be dormant. Okay, now seeds have tissue, because now remember, multicellular, and there's actually a lot of cells in there, and they're each sort of developed tissue, and they're going to have developed tissue from 3 different generations. You have the seed coat on the outside. That's going to be, tough. You have the haploid female gametophytic tissue. That's going to actually end up being a nutrient source for the embryo. And then you have the embryo itself, which is lying in there dormant. Okay, so here we see, this is from your textbook, right? A diagram just to kind of help you visualize how seeds develop. Okay, but that's great, but can we get a better sense of what seeds are? Basically, for lack of a better way of saying it, seeds are just sort of well-protected, resting, dormant stages of, Rebecca, they're a baby plant that's just in a dormant stage, and they can stay in that dormant stage for very long periods of time, years. Okay. While they are dormant, that seed coat is really going to protect them from outside elements, from drying out, from physical, chemical damage, all those different things, okay? Many seeds have adaptations specifically beneficial to dispersal, right? So think about some of the seeds that you may see. Some of them might be really tiny and really good at catching the wind. Some of them may have adaptations to actually catch the wind, right? Think about maple trees when they make their seeds, those little helicopter-looking things that sometimes when they fall off the tree, they fall and they're spinning, okay? Dandelion seeds, Adriana, it's a great example, right? There for catching the wind. You can think of some other seeds that are adapted to catching onto an animal that happens to be wandering by, like those burdock kind of seeds that if you've ever taken a walk in a field, right, you may see them and they stick really almost like Velcro, stick to your clothing and fur of animals. Now, here's what I wanted to mention about that specific palm tree. Seeds can remain viable for extremely long periods of time. Now, a lot of this is going to be species specific, right? So for instance, in experiments done with Verbascum Blataria, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, 100-year-old seeds. They looked to see these 100-year-old seeds, and they looked to see what percentage of them actually sprouted, right? Germinated. 42% germination rate. That's very high. 42%. Amazing. And then we're going to go back to that picture of that palm tree that I told you about in the very beginning, Methuselah. That is a seed. That tree grew from a seed that is 2,000 years old. 2,000 years old. Okay? And now they didn't just plant a 2,000-year-old seed and boom, it sprouted. They actually wanted to see if they could get it to sprout, and they actually pre-treated the seed with some plant hormones and some additional nutrients, and basically took great care in trying to help. They had a bunch of these seeds, like 20, and one germinated. And it turns out that in this particular species, which is the Judea date palm, right? So it's a fruit that is produced, dates. And this is a male tree, so you have male trees and female trees, and it turns out that this is a male tree. It's the only one currently in existence, and since the seed was 2,000 years old, as mentioned in the chat, exactly that's why the tree is named Methuselah. It's just amazing that a biological product, a seed, could possibly yield a living tree 2,000 years later. It's amazing. Okay, so let's go back and talk about those gymnosperms. Okay, remember gymnosperms. Nathan, you have a question? Yeah, let's take that question now.
So this dormant stage of seeds you're talking about, is this the G0 stage in the life cycle?
Trying to remember the figure from one of our earlier chapters. I believe it is, but I'm not a botanist, so I'm a little hesitant to say for sure. I'd like to double check that before I give you a definite answer.
Okay, thank you.
No, sorry, I don't have the exact answer right off the top of my head. Okay, but gymnosperms, right? We talked about gymnosperms last time. Gymnosperms actually mean naked seeds, right? And they're called naked seeds because the seeds and the ovules are not protected by the ovary or fruit tissue. Okay, so here are some gymnosperms that you see here. I kind of show you how many species there are in each one of these groups currently existing. You all know conifers, right? Pine trees, spruce trees, fir trees, right? There's about 700 species of those. They make those pine cones, right? That's where they grow. 700 species there, and that is by far the biggest group of living gymnosperms. Gymnosperms really dominated a long time ago in the Mesozoic, up until 66.5 million years ago. And what happened 66.5 million years ago? Well, a giant rock fell from the sky, collided with the Earth, right? This is exactly the same event that led to the extinction of the dinosaurs. Okay, today conifers, there's still a lot of conifers, and there are whole conifer forests. Most of these conifer forests are at the high latitudes, right, further away from the equator, more toward the poles, North and South Pole. And they also do well at high altitudes. Okay, so conifers really have become sort of colder weather specialists. Okay, colder climate, I should probably say, specialists. The oldest living plant on Earth is a conifer. It's a bristlecone pine, and our best analysis puts it at about 5,000 years old. Still alive, still growing 5,000 years later. Okay. Oh, there's another typo. Wow, I've got two typos. That's terrible. Gymnosperms? No, gymnosperms. Okay. Now, In conifers, you have male and female cones, okay, and they are slightly different. You have the megastrobilus, that's the female or the seed-bearing cone, and here's a picture with a cross section, okay. Remember, the seeds are naked in gymnosperms, but here the seeds are protected inside that cone, okay. You've got those woody leaves, leaf-looking things, those scales, right? They're actually modified branches, okay? And that is where, and the only time that the seed has protection, okay? Then you have the male side, the microstrobilus, right? These tend to be smaller, pollen-bearing cones. They're typically not woody. You can see in the photo how these two cones look different. And if you go into a forest that is, has many examples of a specific species of conifer, and you look at the megastrobilus and the microstrobilus, you'll see the differences. You can actually see the differences between the two. And the pollen grows under those sort of fleshy scales. Okay, so conifer life cycle. Here you've got, and again, you can see the diploid and the haploid stages. That's one thing I think that your textbook actually does well. Color coding the haploid and diploid life stages in most of the chapters. I really think that's good, and it helps describe the life cycles quite a bit. Okay. So gymnosperm adaptations, right? So most of these conifers have their ovules on the upper surfaces of the cone scales, on the higher part of the cones, okay? The scales stay closed, tightly pressed until the seed is ready, okay? Ready to disperse. Some pine cone scales, and one of the best examples of this is the lodgepole pine. Lodgepole pines have a very straight and very tall center trunk that goes from the ground all the way up to the topmost branch. And they're pretty distinctive. You can find them pretty easily in a forest where they grow. Now, lodgepole pines, they live in these zones that are prone to wildfires. And it turns out that they need the wildfires in order to disperse their seeds. The cones stay closed and they only open in very high intense heat. So when there's a wildfire, that closed cone, the heat actually gets them to start opening. Okay, and they open and drop their seeds, right, onto this ground that now has been burned. And what's amazing is that burned plant matter has a lot of what's called potash, which is usually added to fertilizers. So this is ground that has been at least partially fertilized, and that's where they germinate. And what's also very interesting is potash, okay, not hot ash, although it would be hot right after the fire, right? What's also amazing about this is that the fire is going to clear out a lot of the other plants that were living before the fire, right? And it's going to clear out this space so that these seeds can now germinate and they have open access to space and light. Okay, so it sort of clears the way for them, and you see how these not just pines, but conifers adapt to having these wildfires come through, okay? And they sort of prepare, and obviously it's not conscious, right? So, but evolution has evolved adaptations that allow them to prepare for wildfires and for the population to continue after the wildfire has come through. Okay, and there's a whole field of this in ecology called fire ecology. So there are many environments that rely on fire. And that's something that we need to understand better in how we handle wildfires and prepare for wildfires. So other conifers have evolved this sort of fake, it's not really a berry, it's, a fake sort of faux fruit. Junipers do this, right? So you get what are called juniper berries, but they're not real berries. They're not technically berries, okay? You can have yews. Sometimes you'll see sort of, it looks like a shrub, right? Some hedges are made of yews, and they'll get these little red fruits that grow on them. But when you look at the fruit, first of all, not edible, but when you look at the fruit, the bottom, it's almost like it's been hollowed out, and you can see the seed in there. That's a yew berry, okay? And it's designed to get specific animals to eat them and help disperse them. And I think somebody before mentioned birds in particular being very good at spreading seed. They eat them. They can't digest them. Their digestive tract can't break them down. Remember that seed coat really protects, right? And then they get defecated out in a new place with a nice little packet of manure of one kind or another, bird droppings or other animal droppings that act as a fertilizer for the seed itself. Okay, questions? So Constantine asked about fruits without seeds. Actually, pretty much all fruits have seeds. Sometimes we have, particularly in the fruits that we eat, we have artificially selected for or cultivated what are called cultivars or varieties that have basically shrunken as much as possible the seeds. So an example would be the banana. So if you take a banana and you slice it down the middle long way, right, and you open it up, you may notice that there are these little blackish specks close to the center of the fruit. Those are actually the banana seeds. But it's perfectly, fine. The banana tree is not going to go extinct because its seeds are undersized, because humans have taken over basically, the responsibility, or maybe responsibility is the wrong way of putting it, but the action of propagating and planting new banana plants. There are species now of things like tangerines, where there's, seedless grapes. Doesn't happen in nature. The seeds are in there, they're just underdeveloped, and you can find them. Sometimes you'll get a seedless grape that has a seed. Same thing with the seedless tangerines, like these cuties or clementines, right? These small tangerines, very sweet. That have no seeds. Sometimes you find a seed, but again, the seeds are there. They're just going to be underdeveloped, really small. Okay. Other questions? Okay. All right. Let's keep going then. How are we doing on time? Oof. Okay. All right, so let's talk about those angiosperms. Angiosperms, right, the word itself comes from roots that mean enclosed seed. Angiosperms are flowering plants, okay? They have flowers, they have fruits. After fertilization has occurred, the flower ovary develops into a fruit, okay? The ovary develops and forms a fleshy tissue around the seed. It protects the seed and can attract animals that may help with dispersal, okay? The ovules are enclosed in what really is a modified leaf called a carpel, and that provides protection and actually also makes it very difficult for self-fertilization, right? Remember, many plant species you get the plant, and it has both the female and the male reproductive components on the same plant. You don't want to necessarily self-fertilize. You want to have cross fertilization with other plants. You want to get pollen from other plants to fertilize your ovaries, right? If you are this tree, let's say, so that you get greater genetic diversity, and that is going to be better in the long run for your population. Okay, the self-fertilization does happen all the time. Some plants are more prone to it than others. Some plants have genetic mechanisms where they don't self-fertilize for a certain period of time, and then when the seed is actually aging, or not the seed, excuse me, the ovary is actually aging, rather than it be wasted, then the probability of self-fertilization goes up. But that's much more in depth than we need to go. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think we're good here. Okay. Other angiosperm adaptations, right? There are specific synapomorphies, remember that word, of angiosperms that includes germination of pollen on the stigma, right? What's called double fertilization, endosperms, which is the tissue that ends up being a nutrient source for the embryo inside the seed, and phloem with companion cells. So let's start, breaking some of those down. So flowers. Flowers can be either just a single flower or a group of flowers. When you get a group of flowers, it's called inflorescence. Okay. Different families of plants have characteristic inflorescence types. You can see some of those here in these photos. I actually thought this was really good, particularly the zinnia right in the middle. It looks like it's one big flower, but when you take a closer look, what you see is that there are many flowers arranged, those yellow mini flowers, for lack of a better way of saying it, arranged around the center. Okay. Flowers are modified leaves. They're just specialized leaves that perform different functions besides photosynthesis. Okay, you have the stamen, which consists of the filament and the anther. This is the male part of the flower. These bear the microsporangia, the male parts. Then you have carpels, which bear the megasporangia, the female parts. You can have carpels that form the pistil. The pistil is broken down into different components: the stigma, the style, and the ovary. Okay. Flowers can have petals, which are, also called the corolla. That's where the name of the car comes from. It means the petals of the flower. And then sepals, which can also, which is the other component of the calyx. I have a diagram for you in a second. Okay. The corolla and the calyx play roles in attracting pollinators, which really helps to explain the incredible success of angiosperms. Flowers have evolved and are very, very efficient at attracting pollinators, whether those are insect or animal pollinators, to the flower and helping with reproduction. Okay. So here we have sort of the diagram of a flower broken down for you guys, some of the vocabulary from the previous slide. Here is the calyx, right? These other sort of base flowers, base of the flower that really looks more like leaves. And then you can sort of almost imagine you take a calyx and you make it thinner and colored and slightly different texture, and then that's what you have with the leaves. Okay. So there's some terminology that you should know. Perfect flowers mean that they have both the male and the female in the same flower, the mega and the microsporangia. That's a perfect flower. Imperfect flowers have either the male or the female, okay? The megasporangia or the microsporangia, and it depends upon species how they do this. In other words, are they monoecious or are they dioecious? Dioecious, okay? Monoecious, one housed is what it actually translates to. The male and female flowers occur on the same plant, right? So you can have, imagine a tree, right? And you can have male flowers and female flowers on the same tree, monoecious, okay? Dioecious, you have male and female flowers on different plants. So one tree is going to be the female tree, the next tree would be the male tree, okay? So again, plants conduct their biology in very, very different ways than animals. Okay, so the earliest flowers, they had what were called tepals, not sepals, tepals, which were undifferentiated petals and sepals, okay? You've had amazing diversity happen in flowers. Just think about all the flowers that you know, and how different they are in the way that they look, their size, their scent, the amount of moisture in them, all these different things that are really designed to attract pollinators. They also differ in their shapes, right? And what I mean by that, are they symmetrical radially, in other words, from the center outward, or are they bilateral, right? So can you imagine splitting them down in half and those two halves being sort of mirror images of each other? Itamar, you had a question. No? No question? Did I get the name wrong? It popped up. I apologize if I got the name wrong. Who had a hand up just a moment ago? Guys, are you there? Uh-oh. Okay, good. You're there. I didn't lose you. I was worried that I was talking to myself for a moment. Although some of you may prefer that I talk to myself, especially after the exam. Okay. So let's talk about carpels and stamens, right? These things all evolved from leaf structures or leaf-like, not specifically leaves the way that we think of them today, but leaf-like, okay? The leaves or these proto-leaves may have curled up and start to protect what's in the center. Stamen have also done this, right, where the leaf sort of curled up and evolved so that it's at the bottom with the sporangia up at the top. Now we call that an anther, okay? An anther in the filament. So here's some more about self-pollination. Remember, you can have perfect flowers, right, where you have the male and the female on the same plant, and here it could even be in the same flower, right? Perfect flowers have both. Perfect flowers tend to be more likely to self-pollinate, okay? Self-pollination can usually be disadvantageous, right? Why? We talked about it, genetic diversity. In the long term, that can be very disadvantageous. So there are many mechanisms that have evolved to sort of lower the probability of self-pollination. Here in this diagram, I'm showing you a flower that its pollinator is a hummingbird, right? And remember, hummingbirds have that long, thin beak that they use to go into a flower and pick up nectar. That is their food source. The nectar can be very sweet. And in the process, they're also picking up pollen from one plant and taking it to another plant and helping pollination occur that way. And so what you can see here is that in this particular case, right, you can have access to the anthers blocked by this part of the stigma down here at the bottom, okay? And then what can happen is that so the hummingbird comes in here and can't get to the anthers, right? Now it goes to the next plant, and maybe that plant has the stigma where it's both of these little sort of parts are up, and it can access the anther there. So this helps with cross-pollination as opposed to self-fertilization. So there's many mechanisms that have evolved to help control rates and probability of self-pollination. Okay, most angiosperms are pollinated by animals. Those animals can be insects, they can be birds, they can be bats, they can be humans. But the pollinators that are most often attracted to specific plants fall under the insects, birds, and bats. Okay, this coevolution that has happened over very long periods of time has really been beneficial for both the plant and the pollinators. Okay, this is one of the reasons we believe that angiosperms are so diverse, that they have been so wildly successful biologically. Most of the time, the reason that it's beneficial for the pollinator is because they are getting something beneficial to them. The hummingbirds get access to the nectar. That's their food source. Bees pick up the nectar, right? And other insect pollinators, and they use it to make their food source. Bees use it to make honeybees, right? Bats as well. There's lots of bat pollinated plants. Some of these relationships can be really, really specific. In other words, you have one plant that is pollinated by one animal. A lot of the orchid species are exactly like this, where they are pollinated by moths, and the moths actually have evolved to very closely match the flower species that they pollinate, and how they get their source. So for instance, there's a famous story about Charles Darwin. Darwin loved orchids and collected them. And someone brought him an orchid that had a really long, 11 inches, almost a foot long, what's called a nectar spur. The nectar is down at the bottom, 11 inches long. And what happens in orchids is that moths land on the flower and they basically use their tongue to lap up the nectar at the bottom of the nectar spur. And Darwin laughed. And this was a newly discovered orchid, and Darwin laughed, and they said, well, what's so funny, in essence? And basically what Darwin said was, well, I see this orchid, and that tells me that there must exist a moth with an 11-inch tongue. And it's true. Much later, it was found a moth with an 11-inch tongue that that pollinates this specific orchid. So there you go. The insights of someone with the particular skill set of Darwin. Then you have other species that are bat pollinated, and I thought I had put here, maybe I put it on the, okay, I put it on the next slide here. Pollinators are much less specific, but other pollinators are much less specific, but flowers may have some specializations. What the heck does that mean? It means that there are certain consistent things when you look at angiosperms based upon their pollinators. For instance, bird pollinated flowers are very often red, and they very often don't have a very strong fragrance. Why? Birds don't navigate by smell, okay? They are very visual. And so red grabs a bird's attention very easily, as opposed to insect pollinated flowers, which have very characteristic fragrances. So insects are using fragrance much more than birds are to find these flowers, which for them is a food source, okay? Many bee-pollinated flowers have very specific conspicuous markings that may only be visible to bees. Bees, their eyes are different than ours. We see in what's called the visible spectrum of light, right? We see visible light, the colors that we see. Bees actually see in the ultraviolet light range. And so what they are seeing is different. The light that they're actually seeing is different than the light that we see. When they look at a flower and we look at the same flower, we're seeing different things. Our brains, the bee brain and the human brain, are seeing different things. Okay. And there's a great image. I don't think I put it here. No, I did. So for instance, here's this particular flower and here's how we see it on top, yellow. Okay, but here's how it looks to a bee when you have, you know, and the way that we do this is by looking at using an infrared camera, excuse me, an ultraviolet camera to look at the flower. And this is what we see. It's very, very different. Okay. Bat pollinated flowers. So plants that rely on bats to pollinate. Bats are active at night. Obviously darker at night, so the flowers have to be brighter. So almost all bat pollinated plants have white flowers, easier to see at night. Okay. We are really behind today, so we're not going to finish, I think, all the slides I have for you. Okay, so angiosperm life cycle, I think we're okay. You get that from the image. Okay. Fruit. Okay, so fruit aids in dispersal, right? Animals eat the fruit and then will digest the fruit. The seeds don't get digested, and then they can be deposited someplace else in the animal's feces, okay? Other fruits are actually not, do not specialize in being eaten by an animal, but they can be adapted to wind dispersal or water dispersal. Coconuts are a great example of this. Coconut is the fruit of the coconut tree. It contains the seed. Coconuts float. Why? Coconuts grow in the tropics. Coconut trees, and they often grow close to the water sources, and so they can disperse island to island by floating on ocean currents. Okay. You have simple fruits, right? Simple fruits develop from one carpel, like a plum. You have aggregate fruits, which contain many carpels. Think about a raspberry. When you look at a raspberry, you see all those little carpels in there. You have multiple fruits that form in a cluster of flowers. A fig is like this. So when you open up a fig, you can see all the individual little fig fruits in there. Pineapples are like this as well. Okay, and you have accessory fruits that develop from parts other than the carpels, like strawberry and apples. Okay, all right, how we doing on time? Angiosperm phylogenetics. I think we may stop here. Slides that I really want to go over with you, I will add to the start of our next lecture. Okay, so let's stop the share there. And let me see if you have questions before we go. We have just a minute.
Professor, I wanted to know, midterm 2 is going to be on a sheet or blackboard?
I don't know. Dr. Arnett and I have not discussed that yet. We wanted to get feedback from you guys and see how things went on Achieve.
Okay.
Other questions?
Are you guys going to take into consideration the vote?
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. But that doesn't mean, you know, this is not a democracy. It's not that majority rules here, right? We're going to make the best decisions that we can make given the information we have. Nathan.
Yeah,
Oh, wait, that was Nathan, right?
Yeah, that was me. Just another exam-related question. You posted on Blackboard that we wouldn't be able to backtrack on our answers, but some of the questions
Yeah.
that were marked completed, I went
Right.
back to see if I could, and I was able to edit my answers for questions.
Right.
Was that a glitch?
No, I think that was probably an error on my part. There must have been a setting that I clicked incorrectly. Again, we're all on a learning curve.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mohammed Mahdi, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, Professor is correct. Hello. Yes,
Yeah.
Professor, is iClicker doesn't work for me and disappear in my Achieve. And
Yeah.
this session
Wait,
and last
wait.
session, how does it work? I can't fix that.
Yeah. Are you talking about today or always?
No, always.
Always.
Yes.
I don't know. You need to check with iClicker and see what the issue is. It should be functioning properly.
Several times I log out and install again, and how can
Okay,
I
but this, I understand. I mean, I'm not going to troubleshoot your iClicker in the middle of lecture, so this would be the kind of thing that you would want to email me about, or come
Okay.
to office hours.
Okay, I email you and thank you so much.
Okay, sure. Melissa.
Yeah, I just had a question about backtracking. So while I was taking the test, I was under the impression that we couldn't. But then like once I went to go to submit all my answers, it said that we could like go through our questions. I didn't end up doing that only because I didn't have much time left. Like towards the end, I kind of was rushing. So I was wondering if you know, like if I would have clicked to go over my questions, would it have used my remaining time?
Of course it would. You have 75 minutes to complete and submit the exam.
Oh, okay, fine. So then I guess it wouldn't have mattered anyways because I only had like a few seconds.
Right, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Jacqueline. Oh, I'm sorry, I can barely hear you. Maybe. Can anybody hear her?
Can you hear me now?
Very, very quietly.
Can you hear me
Oh,
now?
no, it's only slightly better, Jacqueline.
Oh no. Okay.
Wait, go ahead. I think I can hear it. Give it a try.
Okay. My question was, you know how you assign homework on Achieve, and that obviously helps us out to understand the chapter better. When I was studying for the midterm, I was trying to look to see if Achieve had like any like study questions, and the only ones I saw available were the ones at the end of each chapter that were like in the e-textbook. Do you know if Achieve has like study modules or anything like that you're aware of?
Did you use the visual summary?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. At the end of each chapter, there were like a few questions for each key
No, so
concept.
there's a visual, right, there's a visual summary where it gives you review of each of the key concepts and then asks you usually like 2 or 3 questions for each key concept.
Yes, I did use that. But is there anything else, or is that normally what Achieve gives?
I don't know that you need more than that. I mean, you have plenty of sources. So yeah, I mean, I thought they were pretty good. The visual summaries with those key
I
concept
thought so.
questions.
I thought so too. I'm not saying that those were bad. I just wanted to know if there's any other source besides the visual summary.
Nope, not that I know of.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Rodney, you have 2 hands up.
Hi, good afternoon, Professor. I just have a few questions. One being, which was the chapter that is not in order in our syllabus that we need to be focusing on?
You mean for next week?
It was mentioned during the in the beginning of the lecture, but I forgot to write it down.
Right. The next chapter that we're covering is chapter 36.
Okay, gotcha. Chapter 36. Okay, great. And also, is it possible to make those polls that you had for iClicker available? I was having some issues in the beginning. I was able to submit uh, the last questions that we did, but for the survey for the exam, I wasn't able to. So I wanted to know if we'd be able to make our vote or make our submissions for that.
No, but I mean, um, are you interested in contributing to the poll, or are you interested in the points?
No, yeah, I was interested in, well, both contributing and for points, but if it's not
Right. But
going to be made
obviously,
available.
given the right, no, I mean the poll's closed. It's done. You know, if even if you had wanted to contribute to a specific choice, you know, that wouldn't change the general trend, right? So we're using the polls just to kind of get a sense of where you guys are, and your thoughts and feedback on the exam. As with regard to the points, I mean, I wouldn't worry about it. We all were having trouble with iClicker today, so you know, if I can't rely on iClicker, I can't really, you know, assign points. Uh, Although it's only, you know, what, 2 or 3 points on any given day. But nonetheless, right, that's not something that I'm going to want to hold against you.
Right, understood. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
I was wondering if you would answer a question from the exam.
Apparently I am. It seems to be gripe day, so let's go ahead. What's your question?
It was just the one about the pedigree showing.
Oh, you mean a specific question?
Yeah, yeah.
No, 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 no. I'm not gonna start going into individual questions. If you want to talk about an individual question, office has a place to do that.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Okay. Shira, I see your question in the chat. No, I'm not going to tell you what the correct answer is. The best thing to do is jump into the textbook and see if you can identify it yourself, or come to office hours. So, Parvina, you're asking about why for the exam on Achieve it says 36%, not 15%. I don't really know if I understand the question perfectly, but understand that, you know, the score on the exam is correct in Achieve, but it's not weighted, right? So that's not how it's all going to be calculated into your course grade. Your the exams will be worth a specific percentage of your course grade. That's not calculated in Achieve. Other questions? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.